welcome to our session on CDP selection. Glad you found us, even though this is session 404. I was hoping for a better response. I thought of that. I worked on that all weekend. Thank you. That's appropriate. My name is Lori Mishra. I'm a product marketer with Adobe Real-Time CDP.
And my name is Chris Sessoms. I'm a senior web tech manager at Red Hat. And for those that might not know who Red Hat is, we're an open source company, started in '93, and are a subsidiary of IBM. So today we're going to share some of the results we've seen at real-time CDP at Red Hat. And we'll start by looking at a couple of metrics. So as we've implemented CDP, we've started to see in regional campaigns, and we're hoping to start to see across the global campaigns, 15% decrease in cost per lead. We've also seen 20% increase in click-throughs and conversions, both on-site and off-site. And our goal is, after a full year of implementation, is to save about $1 million in marketing savings and spend. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Lori to define exactly what a CDP is and some of the marketing forces that have catapulted this category of technology.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I'm really excited to have you all hear what Chris has to share. He has an amazing story of how they thought about CDPs and how they approached it as an organization. But before we get there, I wanted to set the table a little bit and talk to you about some of the marketing forces, like Chris mentioned, that are impacting this category of data management broadly. And if you're in this room in particular, I looked at our registration, you've heard about this ad nauseum. You've heard a lot about the deprecation of third-party cookies, and you're probably experiencing that firsthand and the impact to your business. But just to kind of set the table a little bit, we'll all remember a few years ago, Safari and Firefox were some of the first browsers to deprecate third-party cookie tracking. And in 2021, Apple made some pretty significant changes to iOS user tracking, the impacts of which we're obviously all still feeling today. Chrome is obviously the biggest browser, and they have pushed out their timeline again to 2024. But even with that, what that's already meant is that the pool of audiences that you're able to target are smaller, and it's that much harder to measure the impact of the marketing and the advertising that you're doing. So in this climate, it's worth asking ourselves if we should still be talking about the cookieless future, and if we aren't already at the cookieless now. I want to start by talking a little bit about some of the data points that we have collected in some research studies that we have done in the recent past. Actually, one was just published yesterday. You might have seen it. So when we surveyed consumers about personalization and what they expect from brands, what we learned is that 2/3 of them value personalization, and they expect it when they interact with your brand. At the same time, we also asked them some questions about privacy and tracking. And this was an interesting dynamic here, because what we learned from them is many of them have already started to opt out of tracking, and you're probably experiencing that when you're trying to reach people today. And there's also a perception, almost 75% of them said that the data that is being collected isn't being used to help them in any way, that it's only just helping the brand. So there's a huge perception problem with this macro trend of privacy that we're seeing. And again, what this creates is a contradiction where you're expected to deliver personalization, but you have fewer and fewer data points that let you actually do that at the scale that we've all been used to doing. But when we then surveyed marketers and brands, and we tried to understand how ready were they for cookie deprecation, we learned that 75%, and this is just from this year, we did this survey a couple months ago, 75% of marketing leaders still heavily rely on third-party cookies. So the transition that needs to start happening is happening rather slowly to lessen our dependence on third-party cookies. And if you think about the use cases, over half of the use cases are still driven by third-party cookies. And when I say use cases, it's some very common use cases, things you all have probably been doing for years, right? Like suppression, retargeting, personalization. And it's, of course, impacting the metrics that you're used to measuring with as well, like your media efficiency and your click-through rates and things like that. So in this environment, less data, less useful measurement. One thing that hasn't changed is what you are expected to deliver as a marketer and what your brand is still expected to deliver to consumers. And so you might be asking yourself questions like, how do I continue to effectively find and prospect new customers without third-party cookies? How do I personalize website experiences to people who haven't authenticated without third-party cookies? And how do I measure the impact of my marketing programs effectively without these third-party cookies? And this is really why we're all here, because these questions and these problems are what have given rise to the conversation shifting to first-party data and CDPs in general. So let's talk, before I talk about CDPs, let me talk a little bit, if my slide would advance. Am I too far from my computer? Chris, would you mind just clicking next for me? There it is. Okay. Okay, great. So I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other systems you might have in your stack that manage customer data in some way for you today. And it's important to kind of think about how they play or don't play with CDPs. So, you probably have a CRM system, you probably have a data warehouse, you're probably using a DMP. And these systems manage pieces of your customer data. But what stands out when you look at the CDP category here is a couple things. One is it's a system that can manage your known customer data and your pseudonymous customer data. It's a system that has the ability to connect with external systems so that you can bring data in from all of the data sources that matter and then also send it out and activate to all of the destinations that matter. And it's a system that can help you do that with some sort of pre-built framework so that you're not building custom integrations day and night to bring data in and send data out. The other important thing about CDPs is they're primarily built with marketers in mind. All of these systems aren't necessarily built with the marketing user in mind. And this makes sense, and that's why the category has exploded in the last few years, and there's 150 or so vendors that the CDP Institute is tracking as of this year who sell CDPs, and the revenue in the category is almost $2 billion. So now that we've talked about what some of the other customer data management systems in your stack look like and how a CDP fits in, let's talk about CDPs specifically and what any CDP should be able to do. If my slide would advance. Yeah, would you mind, Chris? Thank you. So any CDP should be able to do three things. First, it should be able to ingest customer data or account data if you're managing a B2B line of business into the same place. Second, it should be able to consolidate that data and create a unified profile so that you can have a single view of those customers or those accounts that you want to engage. And then third, it should let you do something with that data, and it should allow you to activate that data out to at least your most common marketing and advertising destinations, and maybe some other places as well. But given all of the challenges that I just talked about and how difficult it is to reach consumers and how much they're expecting from you, we think an enterprise-grade CDP that will scale needs to do more than the bare minimum. Yeah, thanks, Chris. An Adobe Real-Time CDP is that flexible system that we've built from the ground up that helps you action on customer data across your enterprise. So when it first comes to the data ingestion side, you can ingest data from known sources, like wherever you have your email addresses or your CRM IDs. You can ingest unknown data sources as well, like your website first-party cookies. And now, announced at Summit, you can also ingest partner-provided attributes and identifiers into the system. Second, with profile consolidation, once the data has landed, Adobe Real-Time CDP can operate in real time, like is in the name, and create an identity graph as new events and attributes become available so that you have the freshest understanding of who those people are or who those accounts are that you're trying to reach. Similarly, when it comes to segmentation, you can leverage automation to qualify and disqualify profiles as soon as new information is available from your segments so that you can achieve your common and impactful use cases like suppression with the CDP. And then lastly, when it comes to activation, Real-Time CDP has hundreds of destinations that you can send your audiences out to, from marketing destinations to personalization destinations, advertising. And then it also has the ability for you to take your profiles and audiences and send them out to other systems throughout your enterprise that are maybe impactful, like a call center or maybe your enterprise data warehouse. The other important capability that we've built into the CDP is a layer to allow you to do data governance and consent management, which, as we talked about, is very important. So what can happen here is when data is ingested from the front end, the consent that is attached to a profile is carried throughout the system with automation so that you can be sure that not only are you messaging the right person at the right time, but that you're not messaging the wrong person at the wrong time, and that you're staying compliant with your regulatory policies and expectations that your company might have as well on how customer data is handled. One way to think about a CDP is through the lens of maturity. And we've put this together based on how we're seeing our customers adopt the CDP. So what's very common with CDPs at first is, what you're seeing on the far left here is a focus on creating an actionable profile. And at this stage, what you might have is your core marketing teams coming together to bring together a couple of the most important data sources to start creating a customer profile. And that's an awesome goal for any organization to start with. It's an important place to start your path. But what is happening at that stage likely is that you probably still have customer data points that aren't yet incorporated into the full profile, which means that's sort of happening at the expense of the journey that you're able to deliver to your customers. As you mature through and you reach our personalization at scale stage, this is where you're scaling the use of the CDP and your understanding of the audience to the whole marketing organization. So at this point, what we're seeing with some of our customers is they're bringing together all of the disparate marketing data sources, and there's many more users in the marketing organization who are familiar with how the audiences are defined, where they access the audiences, and how they activate them out to the destinations and the channels that a specific team is responsible for. This is also the place where our customers start seeing ROI from their CDP investment. Because they have started to consolidate systems, they see opportunities to retire other technology that's in their marketing stack because they have brought together data sources in one place. Lastly is enterprise adoption. At this stage, and this is really the kind of the nirvana of investing in a CDP. This is really what I think every organization is striving to do. At this stage, you have scaled the use of your CDP, and you've scaled your understanding of audiences to the entire enterprise. So anyone who has an interaction with your customer in any way, anyone who's delivering an experience, is operating from the same understanding of what are our audiences that matter and what are their journeys that are impactful to us. And this is also another great place to see some ROI by retiring additional technology that you might have in your stack. So with all of those definitions and that context, I'm going to hand it back to Chris, who has an excellent story about how Red Hat thought about their CDP selection.
Thanks, Lori. So typically at Red Hat, anytime that we start to look at a new investment or a new technology, we start by identifying the business challenges and looking internally to see what this tech is going to help us assist with. So in doing that, we knew that we had to manage complex, disparate data sources in order to bring that data in and activate that data out. We also knew that we had a lack of visibility into the full customer journey, end-to-end, and we needed to know what were RHEL customers doing, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, what were Ansible customers doing, what were OpenShift customers doing, and where were they at in that journey. We also needed to be able to address challenges in advancing our targeting, our segmentation, and our A/B testing program, which started with our bread and butter of target on-site, but needed to be amplified and activated off-site as well. And we also had an evolving segmentation and privacy that we needed to strengthen around compliance and governance. So making sure that we knew exactly what the visitors' consent and preferences were, bringing that data in and making sure that we're being compliant and using that data properly. We also needed to accurately and easily activate that customer data. So not just doing our go-to-market motion of just being able to do it on-site, but also activating in those channels off-site, whether it was social, paid media, display, video, so on. And obviously, we wanted to improve our marketing investment. This is a tech investment. It is something we need to recoup, and we need to know exactly how that investment would be incorporated and how the return on that investment would be substantiated. By addressing these challenges, we knew that we were building a strong foundation for helping Red Hat get to a precision marketing and personalization journey orchestration across the channels and across the journeys that our visitors, customers, and partners were engaging with. After we did that, we started to identify business use cases and aligning those business use cases to the tech and how that was going to assist us in not only those challenges, but the use cases themselves. So these are just a few, but in those we had the ability to unify cross-channel data and deliver cohesive on-site, off-site journeys and experiences, so that activation of that data outwardly. But we also needed to integrate or iterate on the segmentation frameworks that we had developed and optimize on our ad targeting without sacrificing performance. In addition, we also wanted to provide governance, compliance, and consent management across the platforms and our brands. And when I mentioned segmentation earlier, we needed to provide an inventory, or fragments as Adobe calls them, and making sure that we gave the marketers the ability to pick and choose what they needed and have this building block mentality of we might have base segments, but we have filters and additional segments that we could stack onto that to get the marketers, the organization, exactly what they needed to be able to personalize on-site and off-site journeys. In addition to building this case around challenges and use cases, we had to justify their investment. So our first step was doing our research. As you can see here in this Forrester Wave Magic Quadrant, and we started back several years with this investment and starting to research, but we noticed that Adobe was continuing to creep up far and far up and to the right. In addition to that, we aligned our priorities with those capabilities and the benefits that the RT-CDP brings, and making sure that we were checking the boxes internally that not only the organization needed, but our leadership was expecting to deliver upon. While this was going on, we got questions from leadership and compliance teams of why is data management critical? This is a serious topic, but we were also very tongue-in-cheek and had fun with it. This was just an example of one of our in-between two ferns sketches that we did as an enablement project, where our analytics team talked about cookies literally as cookies. We had both homemade or first-party cookies, but we also had store-bought cookies, second and third-party cookies. And then we had a cookie party in this montage and enablement project that actually had visitors come, and those visitors were browsers and website visitors, and they had particular preferences. They knew that exactly how long those cookies were made, how long were they left out, why were they not in a Tupperware, why weren't they more protected, where did you buy them from? Those type of questions. That allowed us to enable our marketers, but also address a very serious topic with some fun. In addition, as I didn't mention earlier, we had Audience Manager as part of our tech, or a DMP, data management platform. And we saw a lot of success using that data management platform and activating that data outwardly, but also on-site. And in doing so, we knew that we invested in the real-time CDP. We needed to evolve our practice from that data management platform to the real-time CDP. And in doing so, the data management platform within Audience Manager wasn't going away. It was something that we're going to continue to consist and persist, but that we would have a different set of visitors kind of in that Audience Manager instance of data management platform of unknown identities. But we had an opportunity to level them up for progressive profiling and other tactics to get them over into our customer data platform, so we knew exactly who they were, what company they represented, geographically where they were, and exactly how to market to them. In doing so, through this evolution, we also saw return on our investment from not only Audience Manager and customer data platform, but we saw opportunities to start to do a lot more testing and a lot more activation of our data. In those early days of Audience Manager and our DMP, which we started around 2017, we started to play around with our e-commerce platforms and those customers, and starting to put out notifications to those customers that we had entitlements, that those subscriptions were due for renewal. And immediately we started to see impact where we were seeing customers renew those products and those subscriptions within 60 days prior to that renewal date. We also saw when we started to put intrusive pop-up or slide-out interstitial notifications to visitors that we really didn't know how our fan base or our user base was going to engage with. We saw double-digit click-through rates on those, and those were around our RHEL and OpenShift launches in specific regions, and then started to go global with it. That was a shock to us because it wasn't a typical motion that we wanted to continually persist, but it was something we wanted to test out. We saw success, and then we iterated on it. We also saw an opportunity to take this data once it was in our CDP and activate it externally. So whether that was paid media campaigns, doing on-site with our CMS, or an integration with video and display, being able to activate that data became paramount in our future. Definitely want to give a shout out to Adobe Consulting and Search Discovery, as we had partners in this effort, not only on the DMP and the Audience Manager front, but also in our real-time CDP and the activation of AEP. When we talked to our executive teams about this project and about the tech itself, we had to explain that yes, it's another set of acronyms that we're going to bring to your forefront. And we have many acronyms internally at Red Hat. I'm sure you guys do as well. Adobe, I think, takes the cake on this one, though. Whether it's AA, AT, AAM, AEP, CDP, AEM. I think I nailed some of the top ones.
You got it.
But in addition to that, in explaining those acronyms, we had to explain that this was a foundational platform that had services and tech on top of it. And we didn't take it, and as one of our leaders said, we didn't try to sit down and eat the whole whale at one time, or elephant, depending on your preference and mammal there. But that we had an opportunity to pick and choose which services and which capabilities we wanted to enable. And at this point in time, we're actually looking to enable a lot more, and we have a larger Adobe footprint than ever. And that was possible by starting to show that success from the tech that we were investing in, and how we were evolving as a company, and how we were evolving with the technology that Adobe provided. As many of you probably have, just like we have at Red Hat, disparate data needs. So early on at Red Hat, I was part of a user project, understanding exactly what data a user had available to them at Red Hat, and what data did we have internally about our users. So whether it was going into our data and looking at our CRM or our marketing automation or our single sign-on, we also had web behaviors, customers, partners, what products, subscriptions, entitlements they might have, third-party enrichment, being able to understand and associate who an individual is, what are they associated with, why are they important. We also needed to understand what level of consent, governance, firmographic or demographic data we had at our disposal so that we could activate that data appropriately and meet those customers and visitors where they are with the right content at the right time. Taking an obvious page out of the Adobe playbook there. We also needed to touch on with our compliance and governance teams, what was the risk in not pursuing this investment? So at this point, we knew that we needed to have strong governance and compliance. We needed to take account for the preferences that our visitors gave us and the data that enabled that. But we also knew that we needed to partner with a team and a company and a product that would allow that capability to be baked in within the technology. So whether it was using dual labeling or policy labeling to prevent user error and activation of this data, or if it was just talking with our compliance and governance teams and making them aware of this is the data we're bringing in, this is where that data came from, and this is how we want to act on it, whether it was consent, opt-in, opt-out, subscription status, whether they were unsubscribed, or exactly how they wanted to be engaged with from a channel. Tech was just one piece of this. We also had what we like to call the herding of the cats, the people in the process, right? So at Red Hat, we started to identify the current state of the profiles that were going into CDP. And then from there, we had an intake to better understand the segmentation needs of our sales, marketing teams, and the entire organization. But then we also had to make sure we accounted for the privacy and consent that was given up by that data and supplied by that data. Then we had to understand how that governance was going to play into the go-to-market motions for the business, as well as build that segmentation framework that could be expanded or iterated off of, but also activated. So if you ask us now, what's next? Now what? I'd probably think of 3 points in time as far as reference: where we are now, where we're planning on going, and what's ahead of us. So in case of where we are now, we started off our CDP journey with the B2C, or contact-based implementation, and we're currently implementing the B2B or B2P version. So as we go to that ABM marketing capability and connecting accounts to the actual individual people and creating those relationships and identifying how that data will be ingested into this new technology or this newer technology and new SKU. And then looking at where we're going, we initially started with batch data ingestion every 24 hours. So we had a latency, and we had compliance and risk that we knew that was going to come along with that latency. So now at this point in time, we're happy to say that we're at hourly and sometimes up to 4 hours ingestion, and we're starting to make strides towards real-time ingestion within milliseconds of streaming data. So moving away from batch and having the capability of streaming that data and being able to activate that data at the edge. And if we had to think about where we're going, journey orchestration, air traffic control, making sure these segments don't collide, making sure our go-to-market motions don't collide, and making sure that we're not inundating our visitors and our customer base with the same message across the same channel over and over again, but being able to iterate and reach out to them across multiple channels and being able to have a right message and a right theme and the right content to meet them where they are at the time. So with all of that, I'd like to turn it back over to Lori to talk about the Adobe process.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I might need you to
Absolutely.
advance slides for me.
Not a problem.
This clicker hates women. So you heard Chris talk about the very deliberate and thoughtful process that Red Hat took to selecting their CDP. And selecting a CDP can be an investment of time and resources. So you want to make sure that you're thoughtful about this process. So as we start to kind of wind down here, the things I want to leave you with are 5 buying criteria when you're assessing CDP vendors in the market. First thing you want to look for is, can the CDP help you create an actionable unified profile across channels and across lines of business? And this is a really foundational criteria to look for. If a CDP can't do this, then it can't really call itself a CDP. So some of the questions to be asking to evaluate this criteria are, if I have a B2B and a B2C line of business, can the CDP help me manage both in the same system, or do I have to keep my businesses fragmented and keep my tech stack fragmented? does the CDP allow me to bring in data from the sources that matter to me with some sort of pre-built integration? And does it also then allow me to take data out and activate it out to the destinations that I care about? The second criteria to look for here is ingestion, profile refresh, audience creation, and activation, all in real time. And this one can be especially tricky to evaluate because a lot of vendors will claim real time. But when you dig into the details, what you might find with some of them is at various stages, there's latency that isn't obvious as you're evaluating. So for instance, you might have somebody that can ingest data in real time, but maybe the segment refresh is only happening every hour or every day. So that means that the segments and the audiences that you're using are, at best an hour old or maybe even older than that. So when you're digging into this, feel empowered to ask for documentation, feel empowered to ask for demos to help you see that this is real. So again, some of the things to evaluate here are there ingestion patterns that allow you to stream data in real time? Once the data lands, how quickly are profiles refreshed? Is it in real time? And once those audiences are refreshed and available, how quickly can you then make them available to the downstream systems for activation? And Chris, I know you touched on this. I know this is sort of part of the Red Hat maturity journey. How are you all thinking about real time right now versus when you started evaluating our CDP?
Absolutely. So we knew that we had to crawl before we could walk, before we could run. So we knew that batch implementation was going to start us off at that 24-hour latency. But then we knew we were going to leapfrog forward to keep up with the change in the data, but also making sure we're activating the freshest version of that data for our customers. So as we're now getting to that hourly ingestion, we're also looking to start to activate at the edge to all of our channels so that we know that when we're pushing out the social or paid media or display or what have you across the channels, that we know exactly what those individuals or those segments have from a consent, but also from a activation point. Are we able to market to them in that channel? But at the same rate, we're also looking at ways that we can cultivate those profiles. And we actually did a demo internally with my own emails and my own device IDs and took advantage of the identity graph that the real-time CDP has available for us. And we demoed how my disparate identities, I think I had 46 over a 6-month time span, different emails, different device IDs, and how over time as my preferences changed, that the CDP was keeping track as we were ingesting that data. And now that we're activating those data, that what was a Chris Sessom story of how my identities were being put to use and how the data was being activated now becomes a larger Red Hat capability.
Yeah, what I love about that story is how creative you were in showing everyone at Red Hat that this is real by using your own identity and all of the various devices you have. I only have 2. The third criteria to look for here as you're evaluating is around productized governance and consent management. So some CDP vendors might say that all of your consent should be managed fully outside of the system before the data even lands in the CDP. We don't think that's enough. So when you're evaluating this, what you want to look for is there some level of automation so that consent that is collected in, say, another consent management platform can be streamed in or can be brought into the CDP and passed down throughout the workflow. Some of the other things to look for here, speaking of consent management platforms, is does the CDP have integrations with your consent management platform, or does it have options for you to be able to integrate with, build your own integration to a platform that you might be working with? And does the CDP have ways for you to manage who in your organization is accessing what customer data? What sort of access controls are available so that you can make sure that not everyone maybe has access to everything and, an unfortunate accident happens with your activations? Chris, I know obviously you talked about how important this was and how much you worked with your security and your compliance partners. How has that evolved since you went live with CDP?
Yeah, so legislation has definitely changed since our first implementation, whether it's the GDPR, the CCPA, CCPR, PIPL, all the different acronyms that the legislations come into play in different geographies, but even chasing the bouncing ball here in North America as 5 new states come under different compliance and unique compliances, mimicking or very similar to what California implemented a year back, and being able to keep up with those legislation and those compliance and the governance around that. And definitely keeping up to speed with our IT, InfoSec, security, compliance, and legal teams as they're keeping us up to date on those changes.
Yeah, it's definitely an ongoing conversation with governance and consent. That's great. Our 4th criteria here to look for is around the profile level integrations that are available with the systems that you're interested in integrating with. And when you're evaluating this criteria, the things to look for here are, does the CDP allow you to activate the full profile to your destinations of choice, or is it only forwarding event level data? We think it should be able to do both, because for some use cases, you need to forward the entire profile, and for others, it's just the events. But just forwarding events isn't enough for an enterprise-level CDP. So when you're looking into this, ask, can you support the activation of the full profile and full audiences? Can you support the activation of events? And are there, again, pre-built sources and destinations that make it easy for me to bring in my audiences, bring in my profiles and customer data, and then send those full audiences and profiles out for activation once they've been enriched in the CDP. The last criteria here is something that I think is often overlooked, but we think is very important, is a CDP that takes a true platform approach to solving the customer data problem. So something that is extensible by design and can scale with your business. And the reason this is important is because you're going to spend time and effort, like attending summit sessions, to understand what a CDP is and what to look for. So you want to make sure that the system that you pick, the platform that you pick, can scale with you and grow with you and offer you flexibility as the market changes and as your business needs change. So when you're evaluating this last criteria, some of the questions to ask here are there applications and services that the CDP is natively connected to that I can take my audiences and profiles and activate? And does the CDP have integration patterns? Does it provide SDKs, APIs, so that I can build custom integrations as they make sense for your business? So we're at an Adobe event. Spoiler alert, there's a reason we think this is the 5 criteria to look for, because this is the exact criteria we had in mind when we built Adobe Real-Time CDP from the ground up. And we now have hundreds of customers using CDP today who agree with us. With actionable unified profiles for B2C, B2B, and combined use cases, with a patented data governance and consent management framework, with pre-built connectors to hundreds of industry sources and destinations, and the ability to build custom integrations, all powered by Adobe Experience Platform with connectivity to Adobe Experience Cloud applications, we think Adobe Real-Time CDP is the CDP for differentiated customer experience management. So I want to leave you with 3 takeaways here as you're thinking about all of the things that we've shared today. The first here is bring the organization along when you're thinking about your CDP selection. And I think Chris and the Red Hat team did this brilliantly. They made it fun. I'm definitely stealing your homemade versus store-bought cookie analogy. I think that's great. Get people excited about what the CDP can unlock for the business and how it is going to change ways of working, but what's the potential if we change and we adopt the technology? The second here is anchor your process of CDP selection to the audiences and to the use cases that matter. So make sure to think about how this ladders up to your ultimate business objectives. And this is a great way to get buy-in from your executives, right? If you can point directly to the core needs of the business and how the CDP unlocks that, that's going to move things along much quicker. And then lastly, kind of to harken back to my point about a platform, when you're shopping for technology, look for technology that'll scale for tomorrow and that you won't outgrow in your first few use cases or even in the first couple of years of adopting the CDP. You want something that'll stand the test of time. So when you go back to work on Monday and people are like, hey, what'd you learn at Adobe Summit other than seeing Macklemore? You can say, I learned how Red Hat decreased cost per lead by 15%, how Red Hat increased click-throughs and conversions by 20%, and how Red Hat is on its way to saving $1 million in marketing using Adobe Real-Time CDP, and how we can do that too. To keep our conversation going, I have a couple of session recommendations that I think tie in nicely to some of the things Chris and I talked about. Later today, be sure to attend our super session with personalized insights and engagement with Adobe Experience Platform. You heard about Gen AI at the keynote this morning. You'll see some of that in action on Experience Platform at the super session, so don't miss that. Another great session to sort of what Chris touched on about organizational readiness, we have a session with another customer of ours talking about how they adopted the CDP and how they prepared the organization. And then tomorrow, we have an awesome session about how real-time CDP can help you with prospecting and acquisition use cases and support full funnel marketing and help you work with partner data with your partner data providers. And then lastly, if you're interested to dig in further into the privacy and governance topic, there's an awesome session on that tomorrow as well. And before we let you go, a couple of reminders here. We have Adobe Experience League. To kind of what I was saying earlier about documentation, you can go check out the nuts and bolts of how our CDP works. There's great learning content there and a great community of other Adobe users. And don't forget to take the survey. This is both mine and Chris's first times presenting at Summit, so we would love your feedback to help us get better. And there's some cool prizes. So